I'm Alexandra Kane, and this is the story of how I uncovered the largest corporate fraud in my family's history, and how my father-in-law's attempt to force me out of the company became his biggest mistake. The mahogany-paneled conference room of Kane Industries felt colder than usual that Friday afternoon. Richard Kane, my father-in-law and CEO of the company, sat across from me, his steel-gray eyes gleaming with barely concealed triumph. Beside him, his longtime friend and company CFO, Marcus Walsh, shuffled papers with an oily smile. "It's quite simple, Alexandra," Richard said, sliding a contract across the polished table. "Sign over your shares, all of them, for $1. Do it now, and you can walk away with your reputation intact." I looked down at the contract, then at the 15% ownership stake in Kane Industries that my late husband Michael had left me. The shares were worth millions, but that wasn't why Richard wanted them. He needed full family control of the company, and I was the last obstacle. "And if I refuse?" I asked quietly, though I already knew the answer. Richard's smile turned predatory. "Then the board learns about your unauthorized access to company files. Corporate espionage is a serious crime, Alexandra. Even a talented lawyer like you would find it hard to practice after that kind of scandal." He was referring to the late nights I'd spent in my office, digging through years of financial records. He thought he knew what I'd discovered. He was wrong. "Think of Daniel," Marcus added, mentioning my 7-year-old son. "Growing up with his mother's disgrace, it would be tragic." I picked up the pen, my hand steady. Michael would have understood. He had suspected something was wrong with the company's books before his accident last year. His sudden death in a car crash had come just days after he told me about his concerns. "Just sign here," Richard said, pointing to the line. "Then you can go back to your simple legal career, and we can all move forward." I signed with a flourish, then stood up. "See you Tuesday, Richard." His smile faltered slightly. "Tuesday?" "The board meeting. I may not be a shareholder anymore, but I'm still head of legal compliance. Unless you're firing me too." Richard waved his hand dismissively. "Of course not. We're not monsters, Alexandra. You can keep your job, for now, though you might want to consider other opportunities." As I walked out of the conference room, I heard Marcus ask, "Should we be worried about Tuesday?" "She's got nothing," Richard replied. "By next week, everything will be perfect." Perfect wasn't quite the word I'd use for what was coming. I'd spent the last 6 months piecing together the truth about Kane Industries' meteoric rise over the past 5 years. The company had grown from a mid-sized manufacturing firm into a billion-dollar corporation, largely through a series of brilliant international acquisitions. At least that's what everyone thought. The reality was hidden in layers of shell companies, offshore accounts, and falsified records. Richard Kane hadn't built an empire. He constructed a pyramid scheme of staggering proportions. But he'd made one crucial mistake. He'd gotten sloppy with the digital trail. My background before marrying Michael hadn't just been in law. I'd spent 3 years working for a cybersecurity firm, specializing in forensic accounting. When Michael first raised concerns about the company's finances, I started looking deeper. The irregular payments were well hidden, buried under legitimate-looking transactions. But there was a pattern. One that only became clear when you knew where to look. Every major acquisition had been supported by phantom assets, money that appeared on the books but didn't actually exist. Richard had been borrowing from one deal to finance another, creating an increasingly complex web of fraud. The company appeared incredibly profitable, but it was all built on paper. Real money was being siphoned off into private accounts, while investors and partners were being paid with funds from new acquisitions. It had taken me months to document everything, working late into the night after putting Daniel to bed. I created secure backups of every piece of evidence, stored in places Richard would never think to look. 3 days ago, I'd sent a comprehensive report to the Securities and Exchange Commission. Their investigators had been quietly gathering additional evidence ever since. Tuesday's board meeting wasn't just another corporate gathering, it was a trap. But Richard's attempt to force me out had given me something unexpected, plausible deniability. By signing away my shares under duress, I'd strengthened the case against him. The SEC investigators had recorded everything. That evening, as I tucked Daniel into bed, he asked about his grandfather. "Is Grandpa Richard still mad at you, Mommy?" I smoothed his dark hair, so like his father's. "Grandpa Richard is mad at himself, honey. He just doesn't know it yet. Because of what Daddy found out? I paused, surprised. What do you mean? Daniel pulled his stuffed elephant closer. The night before the accident, I heard Daddy on the phone. He said Grandpa was doing bad things with the company's money. A chill ran down my spine. Michael's accident had never been fully explained. A single car crash on a clear night, on a road he'd driven hundreds of times. Did Daddy say anything else? Daniel shook his head, already drifting off to sleep. Just that he was going to fix it. I sat in the darkness of his room for a long time, thinking about Michael's last days. He'd been agitated, working late, making mysterious phone calls. The police had found his laptop destroyed in the crash, its data unrecoverable. Now I wondered, had it really been an accident? The next morning, I made 2 calls. The first was to Detective Sarah Chen, who had investigated Michael's crash. The second was to James Martinez, my old colleague from the cybersecurity firm. The SEC stuff is solid, James said after I explained my suspicions. But if you think there's more, we should look deeper. For the next 3 days, we dove into everything. Not just the company's finances, but Richard's personal communications, his private accounts, his movements around the time of Michael's death. What we found made the financial fraud look almost trivial. Monday night, hours before the board meeting that would change everything, I sat in my home office reviewing the evidence one last time. The SEC would handle the financial crimes, but the rest, that was personal. My phone buzzed. A text from Detective Chen. Found something. Meeting recorded on Kane Industries security cameras, night before the crash. Audio corrupted, but lips can be read. You need to see this. I looked at the photo of Michael on my desk, taken just weeks before his death. I'm going to fix it, he told our son. Tomorrow, I would finish what he'd started. Tuesday morning dawned clear and bright, much like the day of Michael's accident. I arrived at Kane Industries early, watching the security team discreetly let in the SEC investigators who would be monitoring the meeting from an adjacent room. Detective Chen met me in the parking garage, handing me a USB drive. The enhanced video is clear enough. Your father-in-law and Marcus Walsh met with Michael at 11 p.m. the night before his crash. The lip-reading experts confirmed the conversation. I slipped the drive into my bag. Thank you, Sarah. Will you be ready? She nodded grimly. My team's standing by. Just give the signal. The board meeting was scheduled for 10 a.m. By 9:45, the conference room was filling up with board members and senior executives. Richard sat at the head of the table, reviewing papers with Marcus, both looking confident and relaxed. At precisely 10 a.m., I walked in with the company's external auditors, or rather the SEC agents posing as auditors. Richard barely glanced up. Let's begin, he announced. First item, reviewing the Meridian acquisition. Actually, I interrupted, standing up. There's been a change to the agenda. I nodded to one of the agents, who locked the conference room door. Richard's smile froze. Alexandra, what is this? I connected my laptop to the room's display system. We're going to discuss the real finances of Kane Industries, Richard, starting with the $100 million that doesn't actually exist. The room erupted in confused murmurs. I pulled up the first spreadsheet, showing the complex web of transactions that have fueled the company's fake growth. Every major acquisition for the past 5 years has been financed with phantom assets, I explained. Money that appears on our books but is actually just recycled funds moving through a series of shell companies. Marcus jumped up. This is ridiculous. She's just bitter about being forced out. Forced out? One of the board members asked sharply. I played the recording of Friday's meeting, where Richard had threatened me into selling my shares. The board members watched in stunned silence as their CEO revealed his true nature. But I wasn't done. The financial fraud is actually the smaller crime, I said quietly, looking directly at Richard. Isn't that right, Dad? Want to tell everyone what really happened to Michael? Richard's face had turned ashen. Don't. I played the enhanced security footage from the night before Michael's death. The lip-reading transcript appeared as subtitles. Michael, I know what you've done. The board learns everything tomorrow. Richard, think about your family, son. Michael, I am. That's why I can't let this continue. Marcus, be reasonable, Michael. Accidents happen every day. The boardroom was dead silent as the video ended. Michael's laptop wasn't destroyed in the crash, I announced. It was damaged before, during a struggle. The crash was staged after he was already. I took a breath. After he was already dead. Richard lunged for the door, but it was already opening. Detective Chen entered with her team, arrest warrants in hand. Richard Kane, Marcus Walsh, you're under arrest for conspiracy, corporate fraud, and the murder of Michael Kane. As they were led away in handcuffs, Richard turned to me. Why? He snarled. He was your husband, but he was my son. Exactly, I replied. He was your son, and you killed him to protect your scheme. But you forgot something crucial about Michael. He taught me everything he knew about the company, and I taught him everything I knew about digital forensics. The next few hours were a blur of SEC interviews, police statements, and shocked board members trying to grasp the scale of the fraud. By evening, Kane Industries stock had been suspended from trading and emergency management protocols were being implemented. I sat in Michael's old office, my office now, after the board's emergency vote making me interim CEO, looking at the city lights below. Daniel was with his aunt, protected from the media circus that was already building. James Martinez knocked on the door. The forensic team finished their analysis. You were right about everything. The money trail, the shell companies, even the offshore accounts. Richard and Marcus didn't just kill Michael. They've been embezzling for years. I nodded, unsurprised. And the other shareholders they forced out. We found 5 others, all pressured into selling their shares over the past 3 years. The SEC is already arranging restitution. The company would survive, though it would take years to rebuild its reputation. The real assets, our manufacturing facilities, our workers, our core business, were still strong. The fraud had been in the acquisitions and expansion, not the foundation. 1 week later, I stood in the same conference room, addressing the company's employees via video link to all our facilities. Kane Industries was built on innovation, integrity, and hard work. I told them. One man's greed nearly destroyed that legacy. But he failed. Together, we'll rebuild this company the right way, with transparency, accountability, and genuine growth. The response was overwhelming. Employees stepped forward with information about other irregularities, helping us clean house completely. Customers and partners stood by us, impressed by our proactive approach to exposing and correcting the fraud. Richard and Marcus both pleaded guilty to avoid the death penalty. The evidence was too overwhelming, especially after Marcus turned state's evidence. They would spend the rest of their lives in prison. 1 month after the arrests, I took Daniel to visit Michael's grave. The autumn leaves were turning, creating a carpet of gold and red around the headstone. Did Daddy know? Daniel asked. That you would fix everything. I smiled, remembering Michael's quiet confidence, his unwavering belief in doing what was right. He knew I would try. That's why he left me his shares, his position on the board, and all his notes about the company. He was leaving us a way to finish what he started. And now the bad guys are gone. Yes, honey, the bad guys are gone, and they can't hurt anyone else. As we walked back to the car, Daniel pointed to the Kane Industries building rising against the skyline. Is that our company now, Mommy? I looked at the building, thinking about all it represented, not just a business, but a legacy of both tragedy and triumph. It's everyone's company now, Daniel. We're just here to make sure it stays honest and strong. The story of Kane Industries' near destruction and rebirth became a Harvard Business School case study. Corporate governance experts praised our handling of the crisis, and our new transparency measures became an industry standard. Richard's attempt to force me out had backfired spectacularly. Instead of silencing me, he had given me the perfect opportunity to expose everything. The dollar he paid for my shares became an ironic symbol of his downfall. A single coin in exchange for the truth that would cost him everything. But the real victory wasn't in Richard's downfall or even in saving the company. It was in fulfilling Michael's last wish, to make things right, to protect the people who depended on Kane Industries, and to ensure that his son would inherit a legacy of integrity rather than fraud. Every morning, as I walk into the office that was once Richard's, I pass a new plaque in the lobby. It shows the company's revised mission statement with a quote Michael had written in his notes. Success built on lies will always collapse. True prosperity comes from honesty, innovation, and putting people before profits. Below it, in smaller letters, is a dedication. In memory of Michael Kane, who gave his life to protect these principles. Richard had thought that forcing me to sell my shares would silence me. Instead, it had given me the freedom to speak the truth, to finish what Michael had started, and to transform Kane Industries into the company it was always meant to be. Sometimes, when I work late in my office, I imagine Michael is still here, smiling at how his sacrifice led to such profound change. The company that was almost destroyed by greed has become a model of corporate responsibility and ethical leadership. And Daniel? He's growing up knowing that his father was a hero who stood up for what was right, and that his mother finished the fight. That's worth more than all the shares in the world. The dollar bill Richard paid for my shares is framed on my office wall. It's a reminder that true value isn't measured in money, but in the courage to stand up for what's right, no matter the cost. Sometimes the smallest price can lead to the biggest change if you're willing to fight for the truth.